Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we're continuing on with 1984, going over Chapter 2, Part 4, and we're really just continuing our saga of this relationship between Winston and Julia, basically his new girlfriend, for lack of a better word. That's been the story so far of Chapter 2, them meeting up, Julia saying he likes him being super attracted to her. They get together. They're having a bunch of conversations now, getting to know each other a little bit better. And that continues right along here with part 4. Only now we're going to return to Sherrington Shop, in the room above Sherrington Shop. This is the junk shop where Winston bought his diary in that he mentions way back in Chapter 1. And then we see Winston return to Sherrington Shop at the end of Chapter 1 when he goes down there to see if he can interview one of the elderly proles to see what life was like pre-revolution. And then he ends up finding himself in Sherrington Shop. He notices that Sherrington has a room up in the upstairs portion of the shop. And then this is where he sees Julia, and things get awkward. He wants to chase her down and kill her for seeing him out here. He doesn't know if she's a spy yet. This is all pre, him finding out that she actually likes him, has like a crush on him. So Chapter 2, Part 4 starts off with him back at the shop. He's in his room. It sounds like he ended up renting it out. He actually does mention that Sherrington ends up renting it out to him. And just notice the similarities and the differences between this room, again, where the proles stay. He has a room in the village of the proles versus his room and apartment back at the Victory Mansions. There's a 12-hour clock face in the room, which is different than the 24-hour clock of the party that he has back in like the Victory Mansions. There's no telescreen. It's very dirty. Now, also, the Victory Mansion is not anything superb either. He actually says that it reeks, smells of cabbage, things break a ton. He ends up going over to Parsons, Mrs. Parsons' place to fix a busted pipe or like a leaky faucet. And, it doesn't seem like that place is any better. So they're both kind of run down, it seems like. He's here. He's got the glass paperweight with him. It's probably a good idea because he probably doesn't want that hanging around back home at the Victory Mansion. And speaking of that, he probably wants to, why not just keep the diary at Sherrington Shop too? Maybe something for him to consider in the future. He's in his room here, his hideout. Let's call it the hideout. He's making some Victory coffee. He's waiting for Julia to arrive. And Winston recognizes this feeling of danger. He's mentioned it throughout the book so far, how he bought the diary. That's not good. He went out to meet Julia in the countryside. That's not good. He recognizes that he needs to keep to himself. He needs to keep his thoughts to himself. He recognizes that at any moment the thought police could come and grab him. He mentions it, remember, in part 3 of Chapter 2, he mentions how it's only a matter of time. They're all just like walking dead. And Julia kind of says, you know what? No, because I feel like I can evade all this. That's Julia's feeling. Winston is like, hey, my time's running out. So, and he recognizes too the danger in going to visit the proles, talking to the proles, going to rent out this room. But he really values the privacy and the being aloneness. And he used a term before called own life. I think this was like Chapter 1, Part 8, I think it was. So him and Julia are going to meet up here in a second. But I don't think the reason to use the room is not for Julia and like having a place where him and Julia can meet in secret, because they're going around and running around to all these different places. It makes it easier if they just have one place that they know they can meet. I don't think he's doing it for that, though. I think he's doing it because he genuinely values his privacy and he wants to be alone in his thoughts without being concerned about what he's thinking about, that he might be in danger of it. And also, there's no telescreen there. So just outside, we find this little detail that he mentions about this singing prole. She's hanging sheets to dry, or laundry to dry, babies' diapers, I guess. And she's singing a tune that is actually been published by the music department, a subsection of the music department. This is part of one of the ministries, probably the Ministry of Truth. Wait, maybe. Probably the Ministry of Truth. So it's interesting the proles are getting their songs from the ministry. He says this was just published. He says that there's no human intervention in creating the song. It's all created by this thing called the versificator. And he mentions how nobody really sings who's a member of the party. They never sing alone. Never sing alone. No joyous tunes. Now, I'm sure that when you're a part of like this huge group, there's a huge group of party members. Oh, I'm sure they're singing praises to Big Brother in the party. But you don't want to do that alone. You don't want to do that alone. You don't want to give off any sort of emotion that you're having a good time. But the proles can sing to their heart's content. So I just thought that was an interesting detail that he mentions right before Julia arrives. And Julia and Winston, up until this point in part 4 here, they're having a hard time meeting up because Hate Week is coming up, and there's tons of preparations in place for it. So their hours have increased a ton in preparation for that Hate Week. And remember, Hate Week is mentioned all the way like the first page of chapter 1, very first page of the book, where Hate Week is mentioned, how, you know, the electricity is intermittent because they have to use the electricity for Hate Week or something like that. Parsons mentions how he has to collect the subscriptions for, I believe it was Hate Week, where they're going to be hanging up banners on the block and stuff. So it's kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal, it sounds like. Hopefully we get to find out what exactly entails when Hate Week arrives. But Winston, at this point, I think, is crushing hard on Julia. He says that she is a necessity. I mean, he hasn't had a relationship since Catherine. Catherine was like 10 plus years ago. And I wouldn't even call that a relationship. I don't know what that was. They're just trying to have a kid for the party, right? A duty to the party. So I think he really likes Julia. Julia finally arrives, and she brings a bunch of like contraband. Stuff that's not allowed by party members. None of this stuff is like the party-sanctioned saccharin tablets, the victory coffee, you know, the gruel that you get at the canteen back at the Ministry of Truth. No, dude, this is like stuff only for inner party members. And that's actually what she mentions here. If I can find it. She fell on her knees underneath a neat paper pack, heavy sand like. It's inter-party coffee. Yeah, it's inter-party stuff. So all this stuff, sugar, real coffee, bread, jam, milk, tea. All the stuff that only like inter-party members have access to. Chocolate. Remember, she gives him chocolate back when they were in the countryside. And he said he's never had chocolate like this before. Maybe when he was like a kid. But really good chocolate. And she also, in addition to bringing all that stuff, she ends up bringing some makeup. She asks Winston to turn around for a second. She's got like a little bit of a surprise for him. And then when he turns back around, she's in makeup. And he's shocked by this because party members don't wear makeup. The pros wear makeup. And it's interesting here what he says, how she looks. So she's got the normal stuff, lips, red lipstick, cheeks probably puffed up a little bit, nose powdered. And he does mention, okay, it's not very skillfully done, but, Winston doesn't really have a lot of standards. He just points that out. She kind of messed up a little bit, but, who am I to judge? Not too many people in the party, like I said, they don't really wear makeup. And he does mention this, though. But above all, far more feminine. She had become not only very much prettier, but above all, far more feminine. And now think about this. The pros wear makeup. Party members don't. The pros can have sex however times they want. The party members are told that sex is disgusting. They're not really allowed to have intimate relationships like that. The party dictates who you marry, who you divorce, etc. So again, stamping out any sort of dichotomy between the sexes. You shouldn't look at your comrades, remember? And actually, Julia mentions how she wants to look more like a woman, not a comrade. That's why she put on the makeup. And everybody wears overalls. Nobody in the party wears makeup. Everybody's a comrade. Nobody's having sex. So the genders here are seen as the same. Nobody looks feminine. Nobody looks masculine. On top of that, sex is disgusting. So no wonder people aren't getting together. It's all probably part of the party's plan. Stamp out any form of sexiness. Everybody looks the same. Everybody's a comrade. Oh, yeah, and the pros can do all this other stuff. Another form of control. Let's continue. Then a weird thing happens here where Julia finds a rat in the room. And Winston gets visibly shaken by it. It's really strange. Out of like all the things, like Winston hates rats, and he mentions, don't go on. Like, oh, of all the horrors in the world, a rat. He doesn't like rats. And it might be due to this thing where he says he's had a recurring nightmare before, where he was standing in front of a wall of darkness, and on the other side there was something unendurable, something too dreadful to be faced. And he doesn't ultimately know what's behind the wall of darkness, and then just before he's about to find out, he wakes up. So maybe his fear of rats is due to this nightmare, but it's kind of hard to like draw that conclusion. For several moments, he had the feeling of being back in a nightmare which had recurred from time to time, because it doesn't say the nightmare he dreamt of rats in his nightmare. He says, I'm sorry, it's nothing. I just don't like rats. That's all. It's really weird, and I want to know where this goes to. Winston has mentioned before, remember he had the dream of Julia before, back in chapter 1, when she's in the field, and then they end up meeting in the field. He has the dream about, what's that guy's name? O'Brien. How he's like he has a dream where like him and O'Brien are supposed to meet up. So he's got this feeling like, oh, O'Brien's my guy. I got to talk to him about these feelings I've been having. Maybe he's a part of the Brotherhood, the revolutionary group. And now he mentions this thing about a rat. So maybe something happened with rats, and this is like a recurring like trigger for him of something in his past, much like his dream foretold of him meeting Julia. Maybe his dreams about O'Brien are going to foretell about him meeting O'Brien somewhere. Very interesting event that happens there. And then towards the end here, we're getting to the final slide. Julia and Winston have a conversation on the paperweight. And again, Winston buys the paperweight because he sees it as something from the past, like something that the party forgot to stamp out and like get rid of. Because, the party's trying to redact and rectify the past. So the fact that they didn't get to this paperweight, he kind of likes. It's like a reminder of what times used to be. But Winston doesn't think it was ever actually put to use. I think he just kind of surmises it's a paperweight. I'd have to go back and look, but when him and Sherrington are kind of bargaining over the price of this thing, he doesn't really know what it's used for. He just kind of likes it. And then he pictures, it's interesting here, he pictures the room that they are in being inside the paperweight. And the coral was him and Julia's life fixed in the heart of it. So it says he had the feeling that he could get inside it and that, in fact, he was inside it, along with the mahogany bed and the gate-leg table and the clock and the steel engraving and the paperweight itself. The paperweight was the room he was in, and the coral was Julia's life and his own, fixed in a sort of eternity at the heart of the crystal. And that's going to tie in right into one of our discussion questions, actually, which is, does Winston's description of the paperweight at the end symbolize anything to you? That short little description on, this is page 150 for me, right at the end, chapter 2, part 4. Does that symbolize anything to you? And then another discussion question, what do you think Winston will mainly use his new room for? For meeting up with Julia? Or just having time to himself? Let me know what you guys think. That's going to conclude it for today's episode. Thank you so much for sticking around, listening, hearing my thoughts. Let me know if you have any comments or questions. We'll do chapter 2, part 5 next. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.